Today's daf is daf Dalid, and we're up to Uman di Ovid Hachi. And we'll see that towards the top of daf Dalid Uman Aleph. Now, just to start with a takeoff point, a point of departure, we're talking about Rabbi Yitzchak. And the background to Rabbi Yitzchak is that in the case of Dariush, the Persian king, we find what seems to be a contradiction as to how to count the first year of his kingship. When does his kingship begin? When is Rosh Hashana Limalachim? And we reconcile that contradiction by suggesting that although with regard to Malchei Umas HaOlam, Rosh Hashanah is Aleph Tishrei, the exception to the rule is going to be Dariush, who allowed for the rebuilding of the second Beis HaMikdash. And because he was kosher, that's why his name was Korash also, therefore we upgraded him to the status of Ki'ilu Malchei Yisrael. We gave him that honor and deference, and therefore we can calculate his Rosh Hashanah Lilanos like we do for Malchei Yisrael on Aleph Nisan. However, there seems to be a contradiction, and elsewhere in the Psukim that we went through yesterday, it seems to indicate that Korash or Daryavush was calculated like Malchei Umos HaOlam on Rosh Hashanah of Aleph Tishrei. And we didn't give him that respect and that honor of Malchei Yisrael of Aleph Nisan. And the Gemara suggests that there's a difference between before he went sour and after he went sour. Now, it was Rabbi Yitzchak who indicated to us that in fact, he went down, Daryavish went down in his level, and Rabbi Yitzchak proved this from a pasuk which describes how Dariush was motivated not l'shem shamayim, but rather he wanted to have the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt so that they would pray on his behalf. Umandi Oved Hachi Lav Mal Yusahi. The Gemara objects to Rabbi Yitzchak. Is there anything objectionable to the fact that somebody does a mitzvah and he attaches to it a motivation for his own benefit? Correct. We publicly give money and we ask for a tefillah on our behalf. Sanya, we learned in the Brayso. Omer Selazu Litztaka B'Shvil Sheyichya B'ni U'B'Shvil She'ezke Bo L'Chai Olam Haba Reis Et Tzadik Gomor. A person could give tzedakah and add a motivation and desire that he should be considered a Baal Zechus. He's got merits because he gave tzedakah, and that should guarantee the health of his son. Or he wants to get into the world to come. He's certainly not motivated l'shem shamayim. And yet, harezet tzaddik, and according to one girsa, harezet tzaddik gomor. We don't see any deficiency in the fact that he also gets benefit from the mitzvah. Now, some say that this really is only halach and stuck, because in stuck we want to get the money. So whatever, at the Maisa, at the end of the day, Sof Kol Sof, as we say, Tachlis, he gave the money, so he gets schar for the mitzvah. That doesn't include every single mitzvah that you do. You don't build the Beis HaMikdash for your own glory and for your own increment, but rather for the benefit of Hashem, the glory of God. what the Gemara sees in the statement of this brisa, a universal principle that applies to all mitzvahs. Lokashi, the Gemara says, can be Israel, can be Ovdei Kol Chavim. And Rashi, about 7 lines down from the top of the Yomi, explains that Ovdei Kol Chavim, Ein Metiven Lo, Kigmulo, Korei Tagar. That in the case of a non-Jew, if God doesn't respond to his plea, and he does the mitzvah, he gives the tzedakah, and it didn't turn out exactly as we hoped, Nebuchadnezzar's his son got even more sick, then Korei Tagar, he comes and he has a claim against the divine being. Why did I get involved in such a mitzvah, such a good deed? I didn't get paid back for it. Whereas a Jew is not interested in getting paid back. And if things don't go well, he continues to pray and to believe Kel Emunah, that God is a faithful God. Now, in Pirkei Avos, Antignos Ish Sochos famous for saying, Altia ke'eved hamshamish yisrabo menas lekabel pras. And it seems that the thrust of the Mishnah is that we should not be interested in being makabel pras and getting any benefit from the mitzvah. We should be pure l'shem shamayim. So the Bali HaTosfos seems to indicate that Mishnah is referring to Ovdei Kol Chavim, to the Goyim. Because if they don't have a lishma in their motivation, then, as Rashi says, they'll be Korei Tagar if they don't get the Gebul that they anticipated, that they hoped for. And all the later commentaries are so bothered by this Tosfos, because how could it be that the Mishnah in Avos is addressing the Goyim? And they all interpret that what Tosfos means is Ke'ein Umos Ha'om, that sometimes the Jew behaves like a Goy, and if he doesn't get the payback, he sort of regrets the fact that he did the mitzvah. But certainly Tosfos would agree and admit that the Mishnah is addressing not just non-Jews, but also Jews as well. The Gemara now comes up with a different proof to establish that Daryovich was machmitz, that he went down. There was a letter that was sent in the hands of Ezra with specifications about how to build a Beis HaMikdash. And in that letter, it says, Nidbachim di even glol tlasa. So there should be rows of a very expensive even, which is called shayish, of marble, which is not flammable. But at the same time, there should be nidbach di och chadas. There should be one row of a very good tree of wood. V'nifkasa min beis malka tisyayim. And this is what will be spent for the building of the Migdash from the monies of the king. And the Gemara asks, Lama le'av Davino, why would the king of Persia insists that in Eretz Yisrael, when they're building the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, there should be wood placed between the shayim? Savar, because he, the king, thought in his heart, Imardu beYehuda, if at any point I see that the Jews are rebelling against me, Ikle benura, I'm going to light a torch to the Mikdash, and it'll go up in flames. Why? Because I added the wood, which is flammable. So we see clearly shehichmitz, that he's no longer really a good friend of the Jews. He's just, in the meantime, on a temporary basis, he's allowing for building the Beis HaMikdash, but he's already planting. He's got planting the seeds with the wood for the fire that he's going to light the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Even Shlomo HaMelech himself, when he built the Beis HaMikdash, he also integrated wood with stone. Vaksiv, as the pasuk says in the 6th chapter of Melachim Aleph, Vayiver es hachatzer privis shlosha turei gazis, v'tur krusos harazim. Harazim are the best trees, the cedar trees. And he's got 3 rows of gazis. Gazis are certain kinds of stones. And on top of that, he has a row of beams that came from a cedar tree. So this is not objectionable. This is exactly the way Shlomo HaMelech built the Mikdash. So the Gemara gives three distinctions between Shlomo and Daryavish. Number one, Shlomo avad milamala. On the bottom, there were 3 rows of stone, of gazes, and on the top, there was a row made of wood from cedar tree. The Iu, but Daryavish, avid milamata. He put the wood on the bottom so that if he would torch the Beis HaMikdash, it would go from the top until the whole Mikdash would fall apart. Shlomo, number 2, shake bibinyanet. These beams of wood were submerged, deep down, and therefore they weren't flammable. They were covered by dirt. Iu lo shake bibinyanet. But Daryavush had these beams of wood that would protrude from the structure of the Mikdash so that they would be easily lit on fire. 3, Shlomo Saide Besida. Shlomo was very careful to plaster the wood and protect it from flammability. Iu, however, Daryavush lo Saide Besida. So we see clearly that Daryavush was motivated by his plan to perhaps destroy and burn the Beis Hamikdash. Now the Gemara wants to bring another proof that Daryavush was machmitz, that he went down. Rav Yosef, Itema, Rav Yitzchak, Minol, the Achmitz. How do we know that Daryavush went down to the level of a Rosh Behacha? From the following pasuk in the 2nd chapter of Nehemiah, that if you may remember that Nehemiah was telling the king exactly what was going on to the Jews in Jerusalem. And Vayomer li HaMelech, and Nehemiah reports that the king, Shegal, Yosheves Etzel, Shegal means an accompaniment. So he has some sort of an accompaniment, we'll see who that, or what that is sitting next to him. And this is placed in the context of the king's response to Nehemiah's plea. Now the Gemara asks the following. Rabbi Yosef wants to know, my Shegal, what does the word Shegal mean? The word Shegal in Lashon Kodesh is a word that refers to intercourse. In fact, the Rambam writes that the Torah doesn't have words in Lashon Kodesh for the sexual organs and for intercourse, and the Ramban disagrees with him. And one of the Ramban's proof is from the word Shegal. So Shegal, therefore, is Yosheves, so is a female for intimacy who's sitting next to him. L'chora, that would be the queen herself. But Amar Rabba Bar Lima, Mishmei Derav, you know what this Shegal is referring to? Kalbasa, the female Kelef. And she was Daryavish's best friend. She was designated totally for sodomy for the king. And here we have to mention that amongst the the 7 Bnei Noach, we also derive that arayos is prohibited to a Ben Noach. The pasuk says, "Al kein yazov iches oviv esimo v'dovak v'ishto v'oil basar echad." And the Gemara says, "Sanhedrin and Ches v'oil basar echad yatzu behema chayav v'ov she'enam nasim basar echad im ha'adam." And the Gemara derives that amongst the subcategories of arayos, which is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, is sodomy with an animal. So this means hichmitz. He became a Rosh. So the Gemara says, Elamei Atom. If that's correct, and the word shegel means a female dog, Hadich Siv, later on, Daniel gives very harsh rebuke to Belshazzar at the famous feast that is recorded in the 5th chapter of Daniel. That's when the hand comes down from Shemai, Mina Mina Tekel Farsi. V'al Marei Shmaya Hisromamta, Umanaya Di Vaise Haisiv Kadamach, V'ant V'Ravvanach, Sheglasach, Ulecheinasach, Hamra Shasan Baum. Daniel castigates Belshazzar, and he says to him, Al Marei Shmaya Hisromamta, meaning, on the master of the heavens, you have become a Baal Gaiva, as if to say you're greater than God. And Lemone, Mone means Caleb, the besa of his bias, meaning his with a capital H, the besa Bigosh. They brought Kadamach in front of you. And what did you do? Aka v'sarecha v'shegal upilabsh shasisem bohem yain. You took the receptacles of the Beis Hamikdash and you're drinking wine, you with your officers and your concubines and your shegel. So who is this shegel? If you're going to tell me that each shegel kalbisahi, it's a female dog for sodomy, kalbisa bas mishtia chamrahi, do you give wine to a dog to drink wine? We don't know that dogs drink wine, but holokasha. Gemara says dogs will in fact drink wine, just have to train them to drink wine. The malfale vichasye. Malfale means we teach them, we train them, and they drink wine. Gemara raises the following objection. If shegel means a kalba, is I have a difficulty to sieve. It says in a pasuk in Tehillim, which praises the Chachamim and the King and the Mashiach in the future days, it says, Bnos Malachim Bikirotsecha, the daughters of Malachim, which are again the princesses and the kings and the Talmidei Chachamim, they glorify, they honor you. Nitzvah, and they set up Shegal Liyamincha, Bekeser Ophir, and their ultimate reward for all this glory that they give God will be that they would enjoy the Kesem Ophir, which is a beautiful ornament made of gold that comes from a country called Ophir. Now, they eat Shegal Kalvasadi. If you're telling me that the word Shegal is a reference to a female dog, Makom Avasalu Navi Yisrael, how could the Navi El Klal Yisrael at the end of days, when we will praise God and will be on such a high level and God will give us the best rewards, we will have this female dog? I mean, what's the female dog doing here in the context of the praise of Klal Yisrael at the end of days? Hachi Kamar. The pasuk goes down to a real contrast. To contrast the love of the scholars of Israel for Torah with the love of the idol worshippers for a female dog that's designated for them for Sodom. And our love for Torah is such an obsession. We're obsessed with the Torah. We love the Torah like the idol worshippers love their dogs, their female dogs. And therefore we get the great reward. Ibai Sema, another way that the Gemara offers to defend the drush of Rabbi Bar Lema, Li'olam Shagal Malchus. I'll now agree with you that the word Shagal means a queen. But Rabbi Bar Lema, who interpreted the pasuk in Nehemiah, the Shagal Yoshev said slow as a dog, a female dog, Gemara Gmirala. It was a tradition that was passed down on oral Misora, that in this context, Shagal, who accompanied a consort of Darius, was a female dog. Mamai correlates Shagal, and why then does the pasuk use the word Shagal? Shoisa chaviva love kishagal, because he was in love with his female dog. He had such intimacy with his female dog, like he had for his queen. Inami, or alternatively, Shahoshiva b'makom Shagal. That there was a place that was designated for the queen, and that's where he sat the dog, the female dog. Ibai Seiman Ali Gemara is another proof that Darius went down, Hifmitz, Minol the Hifmitz Mei Hacha. This is a letter, a document that was sent by Darius with Ezra, and it was sent to the supervisor of the building of the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, and he gives them limitations as to how much money we're going to spend for the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Ad kesef, kakrin me'ah, ad chintin, korin me'ah, ad chamar batin me'ah, v'ad batin mishach me'ah, u'malachti lo ksiv. So we're only going to spend up to 100 kikar kesef, 100 kurim of chitim, 100 ma of batim, of yayin, and 100 batim of shemen. And salt, we could give them below kitzvah without any limitation. How do we know that hichmitz, that he went down? I mean, after all, he's giving, allotments of money and so forth for the Beis Hamikdash. Meikara below kitzvah, because at the beginning, when he commanded the supervisor in Yerushalayim, the officer, to oversee the building Beis Hamikdash, he didn't specify any limitations for Hashana b'kitzutza. But now he says, you know what? I changed my mind. This is the ceiling, the maximum amount of money that you could spend. Gemara says, "V'dil mei karlavi kimle b'kitzutza." Maybe it happens to be that initially he didn't know how to assess and evaluate how much each dimension of the building Beis Hamikdash would cost. Now he found out. And therefore, we would now prefer all the other proofs that we had adduced that hichmitz. The Mishnah says that on the 1st of Nisan, it's Rosh Hashana, not only for Malachim, but also the Regalim. Regalim b'yechad b'Nisanu? Are you telling me that Rosh Hashana for Regalim, meaning the first regal of the whole season, is on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Pesach falls out on the 15th of Nisan. Amrav Chizda, Regal Shebo Rosh Hashanah Regal. What it means, the Mishnah, that on Aleph Nisan we enter into a month which has the first of the Regal. And the Rosh Hashanah Regal is to be on the 15th of the month, but already in Nisan we enter into that month, which reminds me of the Gemara Megillah. The Gemara at the beginning of the Masechet Megillah says that we should begin studying the laws of Pesach on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is already, right? And the Gemara, and also if you remember, the Haggadah Shel Pesach has a Hava meaning that the mitzvah Sipri Tzitzarim Vigat Picha starts on Rosh Chodesh. Remember that. So now the Gemara wants to know, okay, Pesach is the first regel of the year. It's like Rosh Hashanah for a Golah. My nafkamina. What do we have to know that? And now we're embarking on a major sugya, and Masechet Rosh Hashanah is famous for this, called Bal Tiach. The Torah says that when you take upon yourself an obligation, or if an obligation is imposed upon you, then you have to fulfill that obligation within a certain period of time. Otherwise, you violate an Isser of Lo Tiach or L'Shalom. The noder lemekim alei b'bal tiach. A person took a neder. At what point, if he delays fulfillment, does he violate the Isser bal tiach? And the answer is that if 3 regalim go by, which means he had an opportunity on Pesach, on Shavuos, and Sukkot to fulfill his neder when he came up to the Beis Hamikdash, and he failed to do so, then he violates Bal Tiach. If, on the other hand, he took a neder, let's say, between Pesach and Shavuos during the days of Sfira, then he will not violate Bal Tiach even after Shavuos, Sukkot, and Pesach, because it's got to be what's called Kisidron, right? Anyway, Kisidron. Chav Samach Dalid Reishnim. Kisidron means that he only violates Bal Tiacher when it's Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. All the other regalim that pass by will not calculate into Bal Tiacher and Rabbi Shimon. And that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We'll see later how he derives from the Psukim, that you only violate Bal Tiacher with 3 regalim kisidron in their sequence, which means Pesach the first, Shavuos the second, and Sukkot the third. The Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Echad ad Noder, V'echad HaMagdish, V'echad HaMarich, Kevan Sha'ov Rulav Shalosh Regalim, Over B'Bal Tiacher. So a man took a neder to bring a behemoth as a korban to the Mizbeach. He's not allowed to delay it. The Torah says in Dvarim Chav Gimel, Parshas Ki Teitzei, Ki Sidor Neder L'Hashem Elokecha Lo Ta'acher L'Shalmo. And we darshan from Sukkim that he violates Lotiacha when 3 regolim pass by. And what are examples of a neder? We have number 1, a neder, which is called Damai Olai, which means I will pay to the Beis Hamikdash for Bedek HaBayis that has Kedushas Damim, my value. What do you mean my value on the marketplace? Meaning how much I would bring in if I was sold as an Eved. Or a Magdish. Echad Magdish means he designates an object and he says he'll bring it to the Beis Hamikdash for Bedek HaBayis. He didn't bring it. He delayed it. The Echad HaMarif. And then we have a person who says Erkiolai. Now, Erkiolai is very similar to Dami Olai, but the difference is that if he says Erkiolai, he uses that magic word, then the amount of money that he has to bring to Bedek HaBayis is specified by the Torah. And it depends upon his age. It depends on his gender. For example, in the case of a Zachar, this is at the end of Sefer Vayikra, the Parsha of Erchin, it says, Mi ben chodesh v'ad chamesh shonim. For the first 5 years of his life, he's worth chamisha shkolim. And it goes up and up and up. From 5 to 20, it's already 20 shkolim. From 20 to 60, it's already 50 shkolim, and now it starts going down. The tape is off once you hit the 60th birthday. From 60 and up, he only brings 15 shkolim. All right. In any event, that's called Erkiolah. Now, the Tanakama that we're learning now holds that any 3 regolim in any order is going to generate a violation of Baltiach. So, for example, if he took his neder Erkiolai sometime during the Sphira period, then once we get to Chag Pesach, he has now violated Baltiach if he hasn't brought his money to the Bedek HaBayis. But Shimon Bar Yochai disagrees. He's up Shlosha Regon Kis Sidron. It's got to be in a certain specific order, starting with Chag HaMatzos Tchila, and once Pesach and afterwards Shavuos and afterwards Sukkot pass by, and he hasn't yet brought and fulfilled his neder, he violates Baltiach. The pain higher of Shimon Yochai Omer, according to his shita, regolim, how many regolim would have to pass before a person, by delaying his fulfillment, violates Baltiach? Pamim Shlosha, if let's say he took his neder right before Pesach, so 3 regolim will pass, and with Sukkot he violates Baltiach. Pamim Arba, let's say he took his neder after Pesach. So now we're going to count 4 regolim. We're going to count Shavuos, Sukkot. What did I leave out here? Okay, we'll go through the cases in a minute. Pam Arba, Pam Chamicha case. Nada Lifnei Pesach Shlosha. Fine, that we spoke. Lifnei Atzeres, right? He took his neder during the Sphira period. Then Chamisha. Now, how do we get Chamisha? Let me get over. Go. So we're going to have Shavuos, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. 5. Right? Because we're only going to start counting when we get to Pesach. So 5, we're going to pass 5. That's when he violates Bal Yirur. L'fnei Achag. Now we have the last scenario. He took his neder before Chag Sukkot, Arba. Sukkot passed, Pesach passed, Shavuos passed, and next Sukkot passed. And then he violates Baltiach. Now we have a brisa that addresses various shitos in the Tanoim as to when you violate Baltiach. Until now, we only had 2 shitas. We had Tanakama and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Now we're going to learn another couple of shitas. I believe that there's 5 all told, if I remember correctly. Tan Rabbanan, we learned in the brisa, Chayve Hadomim, if a person made a neder and he declared Domi Olai Ve'arachim, or he declared Erchi Olai or Charamim. Rashi says he took a cherem for Bedek HaBayis. However, this is a little bit difficult, this Rashi, because if it's a cherem for Bedek HaBayis, then that's exactly the next category called hekdeshos. Unless maybe cherem is a monetary obligation to Bedek HaBayis. I don't know. Hekdeshos, it says Higdish Chefetz the Bedek HaBayis, so it's an actual physical object. But in any event, Tosfos is not happy with this Rashi. Rashi identifies cherem as Hekdesh, and Tosfos adds that it could be what's called Chermei Kohen. Now Rashi happens to be of the opinion, which we'll get to later on in Daf Hey, that Chermei Kohanim are not subject to Baal Tiach. Tosfos holds L'Shitosam that even in Chermei Kohanim is Baal. So Mitzvah Shem, we know when we get Daf Hey, which will be tomorrow's Daf, we'll talk about Chermei Kohen. Chatos v'ashamos, a person violated a lav sheish bo kores, and he violated a b'shogeg, or he's not sure that he eat chalev, that he eat shuman. He has to bring a korban chatos, a korban osham. Then we get to Olatzut Shlamim. This is a korban nidava. He took upon himself voluntarily to offer an olah or a shlamim, stakos. He promised, pledged to give money to the aniyim, umasros. He was mafresh maser rishon or maser sheni or maser ani for that matter, and he hasn't yet delivered it. I mean, here, okay, well, I'll wait for my comment until we get to the next Omud. Bechar, which is talking about Behemoth Tahora, the newborn of the Behemoth Tahora, Peter Rechem Imo, has to be brought to the Mizbeach. Ma'aser Behemoth, the 10th of this year's new animals that were born, Pesach, and the Korban Pesach. And now we turn to Daf Dalet Amud Beis. Leket Shikru Peah. These are other matnas aniyim. Even sha'avra aleim shlosha regolim over b'bal tiach. So he violates bal tiacher on all the above, any and all of the above.